Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel.
So now we are assembling the rear framework to mount the wing. I was just getting going on the electronics and I realized that before I mounted up this nice motor and got the speed control in, I really should go ahead and get this done. It's just easier without all that extra weight in the car. So we are on page 36, number 5, final assembly. Servo is all in. Everything is set up. I've got some tuning, of course, to be done here with these turnbuckles, but that'll all get done on a tuning board. So it's at least set up roughly for the moment. So let's see, we've got these little connecting pieces here, these aluminum anodized metal pieces here, aluminum pieces, and we have our braces. So we're going to need Loctite on all of these little screws because we're doing metal into metal. And we've got a whole bunch of countersunk 8mm just checking to see if there was any difference in size with these 4 pieces. They are identical. Don't tighten them hard until you've got both screws in, and then you can give them a little bit of torque. Don't over tighten though, you don't want to risk stripping the aluminum. Now make sure you pay attention to your orientation. You want the rounded sections facing in the correct directions and the flat sections facing in the directions where they're going to be mounting to things, like so. So now we need to make one that is the opposite of this. So we have 2 identical but opposites, mirror images. And so now we can attach these to either side here and here. Remember, don't fully tighten one until the other is in place. So there we go. And now we can attach our rear piece. Before we do that, we've got we got to attach our two standoffs here and here with another pair of 6s. We need flat 6s. Now they've got our initial position at 1 down from the top. I'm going to go along with that. A little too much on there. And now we anchor that to the rear of the pieces we built and just attached. Okay, and see how sturdy this is? It's not flexing here, it's flexing here at the chassis. So weight here directly translates to power, to downward force here at the power pod. Very nice. It's a very nice design. It's complex, but very nice at the same time. So I'm not going to be putting on the wing at this moment, but we will be using a pair of 2mm spacers, between the standoffs. That's their recommendation. Now, you could potentially move that forward and backwards slightly over a range of spacers. You could go to 0 spacers. You could go out to maybe 4 or even 6mm. The further out you go, the more downward force, the more leverage the wing is going to have. So that would be a way to potentially adjust the downforce that the wing provides. In addition to its existing settings, you could potentially fine-tune it by moving it a little further away or a little closer in, and thus increasing or decreasing the amount of leverage that that downforce has, changing its influence. Things to think about. So now they have us moving on to motor mounting, pinion, battery placement, painting the body, setting up the front wing with the polycarbonate pieces that would go on there. I am probably going to be using one of their upgrade wings. I have several from my existing. One of the nice things about F1 is that most of the rear wings from any of the cars and most of the front wings from any of the cars are interchangeable. Most. That does not always work, but usually with small modifications at the very least they fit, and a lot of them are direct swaps. So I am going to start mounting electronics now. The chassis is, for all intents and purposes, finished. I'll be mounting the motor, and I'm not going to show you the process of mounting the motor, but I'll go through and show you bits and pieces. It's steps along the way. We have a few things here. For example, this piece here we haven't used. This looks like it's for our antenna. Again, that didn't hasn't been seen so far in the plans. I'm going to figure out where that is going to come. Oh, yeah, right here. Okay. So we mount that to the chassis. It wouldn't be one of those two holes. Ah, this hole right here behind the servo. That's our antenna hole. And there should be a corresponding hole marked on the body somewhere. Looks like it's right around here, just off the driver's shoulder. Okay, so this little piece here is our battery stop to keep the battery from moving forward, and that screws down here. I don't think that that these two holes are used for anything in particular. Does not appear so. So I guess what we'll be doing is when we see okay, this is kind of interesting. Normally you don't leave batteries in the car when you charge them. Okay, but to get the battery into this car, you need to remove the shock absorber. So we either need to do that every time, or we need to just leave it in the car. Now, I'm going to go ahead and set this up for this Orion. This is a good battery. It's a good size, I think, for this car. I have slightly smaller batteries that I might try, but excuse me, I think I will go with this for initial testing. You see, you would need to check this battery position every time, this setting here for the front stop, unless your batteries are all the same size. If you move the rear position, you definitely need to change this. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up for this one, and just see how that goes. And I'm going to use a titanium screw and an aluminum nut. And since we can't reach in there with a regular hex driver like this, nut driver, I'm going to have to go in from the side with a wrench. See, this is another thing that would be best done earlier in the process. You don't have to attach it permanently, but putting it in place earlier would be easier than trying to do it now, because you've got all this structure above that makes getting in there difficult. Okay, so now that I've got it, the nut started, I can reach in here with the 5.5 and tighten it from below. So there is our battery stop. It cannot move forward or backward. The little rubber band that goes over the top here is basically just going to be a placeholder to keep this from jumping around. So I can now remove this. Take off that. Now I'm going to see if I can't tighten that down a little more. This is why keeping these old L wrenches laying about is a good thing, because you never know when you're going to need them to reach into an awkward place. This screw here is a teeny bit loose. Okay, so just tighten that down a little more to make it a little more secure. Wrong one. Okay, nice and easy. Looks like they've given us a few spares. I'm not sure where else these go to. So let's get the ESC in place. Now make sure you've got your sensor cable and anything else that goes into your ESC plugged in ahead of time, because this is a very restricted space and it may be hard to reach. Oh God, I hate this damn 3M tape sometimes. Sometimes it's really crappy. Ugh. Sometimes the antenna doesn't want to go through the tube, and number one, make sure that the aperture is loose enough at both ends. And then try just a drop or two of bearing oil. Very light, thin oil, not a grease or anything. And that will help slide that antenna right on in. Now, I don't know if you noticed, I pulled back a little bit before I slid it down, so there was a little bit of slack. That way there's a curve, like an S of the wire. It's not pinched or yanked against the housing here, so it's not being pulled out hard where it could, you know, pull it free from the circuit board, damage it in some way. So, antennas in place, receivers in place. Now it's going to be time to mount the motor, and then we got to route and solder wires. I'm going to pull out some of these little suckers. These are just some things I 3D printed. You can buy pieces made like this. They're usually made out of carbon fiber, and they're pretty expensive. It's just like 2mm thick, 3mm thick, with some holes in it that the wires can slide onto. I may have to make a new one of these because this is a very thick insulation compared to the wire I had been. Well, it's gonna work. What this does is it helps keep the wires in position, helps route them, makes it cleaner. See, that helps keep the wires organized and run properly. And, you know, it costs pennies worth of plastic filament to run these off. You can do it out of some scrap of any color filament I've got lying around. I really need to run a new set with a slightly larger hole. I think I'll just do that. I'll leave this one in place though, since it's already there. So, motor mounting. Okay, 64 pitch. I think I'll start with 23 tooth, and that way I can go up or down from there. Just see how that comes out, because I don't have any baseline yet for speed and whatnot for this. Looks like we could potentially get 3 screws onto this motor with the way the mount is designed here. You need a certain amount of gear lash. When you've done it as many times as I have, you kind of learn to just do it by feel, but ultimately you want to learn how to do it, you know, a lot of people, what they do is they run a piece of paper between the gears, and that sets the distance. That doesn't always work well with gears that are this finely pitched. 64 pitch gears, the gears are they're very short and they're very tight. So a piece of paper could provide way too much lash. So I had run into a little problem earlier with the fan not fitting in between the carbon brace here and the axle. The fan would have still been mounted dead center, and for a 30mm fan, that doesn't really send the air exactly where you want it. It puts it in the middle. The fan blows here, not against the open part of the can. With the miracle of 3D printing and CAD, I designed this little 2mm thick bracket, easy print, and this is going to bolt to the position where the fan would otherwise have mounted, right here. It's going to provide me all the clearance I need for the axle, and it moves the fan over as far to the edge as possible, blowing directly into the motor. So now it's worth actually having the fan there. So I'm going to go ahead now and bolt this piece on, just using aluminum hardware to keep everything light. Actually, those are a little long. You see, well, see, I want the screws to go far enough that they're going to get into the locking portion of the lock nut. Let me try the 8mm size and see if one of those will work. And if it does, I'll switch them both. Yeah, I think I'm in the ballpark. And there we go. One nicely mounted fan. Now, one of the things I did is the fan leads come out the side of the motor over here and go along the housing. There's a little notch, a little L-shaped notch for them to tuck into, but they don't stay there. And you're never gonna cut these wires and solder them that close. So I went ahead and put a little drop of, and I mean literally a half a drop of 5-minute epoxy into that little L shape, got both wires in there, and then capped it with another teeny bit of 5-minute so that the wires cannot just pull out and, you know, get themselves back into the fan or be any kind of issue. They're always going to be in place. So now I'm going to trim these because I'm going to be not going to be using the plug here. I'm going to be soldering them to my battery leads, and I'm going to take a small piece of a reasonably long piece, probably about maybe 2 inches long, of heat shrink tubing, something fairly thin, to hold both of these wires together. I wish these wires were joined the way a lot of 2 and 3 wire strips are joined, like, you know, like this, but it is not the case. So I'm gonna cover them in some heat shrink, and that way if they bump up against the gear or anything, if they, you know, run into something hot, they're gonna be fine. I'm probably just gonna anchor them here with a zip tie or something, but in any event, it'll make them a little less prone to accident. That looks like it might do. Perfectly. This thing needs a refill. Perfect. Okay, so I'm beginning the tuning process. First thing to do was to bind the receiver to the transmitter so I could start doing setup. It's good to have a set of just regular AA's around and an old style battery box. You could also have a LiPo pack of the correct voltage. But however you do it, it's nice to have an independent power source for the receiver to help you when you're, doing maintenance, or when you're doing an assembly or repairs, things like that. That way you don't have to have a full LiPo handy and plugged in. You don't have to be ramping up the ESC to get power into the receiver. You can just plug in and then you can manipulate your steering servo. In any event, so that was the first step. The next step was to trim out the steering servo so the arm was as close to perfectly vertical as possible. Then the next step is to adjust the turnbuckle that connects the servo to the steering linkage and make sure that that is centered when this is centered. Then I did a basic toe out adjustment, adjusting the arms so they were about where I want for toe out and as close to being equal as possible, at least, what I could do visually without any other tools. So that basically gets things started. F1s are easier to do this kind of work on in that you don't have any rear camber links. You don't have camber links up here either. Camber is determined by the various pills and how you have those set. So it's very exact, and those items can be changed if you need to make an adjustment. But otherwise, you don't need to tinker with them. So mainly what we're doing is just adjusting our steering. So since camber is set, caster is set, all we can do is set our toe in or toe out. And having a little bit of toe out is usually the best setup. It's more forgiving. You get quicker turn in, better straight line stability. So it's really not necessary to hook this up to anything dramatic. I can basically just take a simple tool and measure out the toe and get a ballpark on that. That's it's towed out pretty harsh. I'm gonna bring it in a teeny bit, but not a lot. So, as you can see, there's just not much to do as far as manual tuning, such as adjusting camber links and then having to readjust your steering, and then back and forth until you get things where you want them. That's one of the nice things about F1 is that if you want a little more caster, you take things apart, you move a couple of pieces around, flip them or swap them for a different set of pills, bolt it back down, and you've got your new setting. Yeah, I think I'm good with that for first runs. So that's about that. All the springs, everything else has already been set during the assembly. So, the suspension is where it is. Body fits nice. I ended up having to switch bodies, had a paint problem. I guess maybe I didn't scuff the body enough. One thing to do when you're painting bodies is to, after you've washed the body well, to take a Brillo pad and lightly scuff any of the paintable surfaces. In other words, you don't want to scuff the windows. And I wouldn't do that even if I was going to tint them. You just, the thing with Lexan is scratches, scrapes, when you paint them, they go clear again. So if you did scrape up the windows a little bit, tint would probably hide that, but still better not to mess with that. Just avoid the windows, and don't put your window masks on at this point. Make sure you've done all of this stuff ahead of time before doing your window masks. But like I said, maybe I didn't scuff it enough, or perhaps the paint just wasn't mixed properly. I mean, I certainly shook the can enough that it should have been, but this particular, the other 2 out of 3 colors, the paint stuck on perfectly. The one color is just peeling up, flaking off, rather frustrating, because I basically wasted a body and wasted several cans of paint. So I've got a new body on order, and I'm basically taking one of my older bodies so I can run this weekend, and I just moved the, cut fresh holes. These are the old holes. This was on my Tamiya. The whole body hole location's different on the X-Ray. This is the antenna hole. So that's what I'm going to be running for right now. This puke green on top of orange. And so it will do for this one weekend. Next weekend I should have the new body painted and set up. This one's sits a little high too, but anyway, these things happen. So I'll be showing you some race footage from this weekend, and that'll be in the next video in this series. So just FYI, when I do these videos, I do them, I make a bunch of them for each car, and I put them all into a playlist. If you're not familiar with what a playlist is, you can go to my channel homepage, just scroll down below the player where the comments area is, and you'll see my little icon and the name of my channel. Click on that. That'll take you to my channel's homepage. And once you're on the homepage, there are several tabs: home, videos, playlists, about, etc. Click on playlists, and then you'll see all the playlists for all the different vehicles. And if you click on, let's say, the playlist for this car, it will play all of the videos that I've made up to that point in order. And you can manually select from that list which individual video you want to watch at any moment. Or you can start with video number 1 and just watch all the way through. For most of my builds, that would be quite a few hours. For example, this car is probably going to have anywhere from 5 to 7 total hours of video footage on it. And I try to pass on as much information as I can, not just this specific vehicle, but general build techniques for building any type of RC car. So anyway, you guys might want to try checking out some of those playlists, watching some of the other videos. Sometimes I get questions where I kind of get the idea that the person hasn't watched previous videos, because they're asking questions that were covered in detail, and that's one of the reasons I make sure to put a part number, or excuse me, a video identification number in the lower left corner. So this might be like part 7, part 2, part 5 in a series of videos. So you might want to check those other videos out and see what you've missed if you're curious about a particular vehicle. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you'll receive notifications every time I launch a new video.